Damn, son, where'd you find this? A King Majora exclusive. Trapaholics meme rap legends. Fuck with your boy. This is King Majora. Take it away. Brrrr. What's up, people? It's King Majora here. Look, so this is a continuation, not really, you can count it as a soft reboot, if you will, of the last video I did, which is basically my experience or testimony, my work in the occult and spirituality early on, and several instances of external paranormal happenings, and a little bit about myself. And it got me thinking, and basically, it made me come to the conclusion that I'm not one of those who does anything for the money. I want to tell you the truth, and I want to keep my uploads genuine. I don't want to make it something that's strictly so I can add revenue or it's a job for me. That's never been the purpose. I have a job. People always want to tell me I'm fucking terminally unemployed and shit. Like, no, I actually, as we speak in the works, I have a TSA job coming up with my flooring as a journeyman's apprentice from my father's business. It's fourth generational. I'm not just brokey. So that's just flaking. Basically, what I want to say is that my life and how I've lived it, and as I go into this video, if you have had abduction phenomena and related is your, I guess, experience and studying unorthodox things and living unorthodox ways despite the herd mentality, and certain ways, mind you, if you find similarity in your life or examples that I bring up, you may be, not with 100% certainty, but you may be. And I want to disclaim that what I'm going to talk about is very specific, because the whole idea of being a starseed depended solely upon manipulating people who are isolated because of some sort of event in their life where they have a third eye kundalini awakening, or some sort of meaning through conspiracy or anything else had broken their perception of what life was, or they have done a bit of drugs like cannabis, such as I have, or psychedelics, and then they go on this path of, my Galactic Federation Ashtar Command, styled ascension work, and that is really, it all hinges upon very vague circumstances of what makes someone a starseed, and they prey upon people, these people who call themselves the light workers, starseed gurus. They are a form of parasitical leech, really, because, the starseed characteristics are so vague. Anything that you're an outsider, you think sci-fi or aliens are cool, or you believe in the alien concept or something similar to it in a vein. A person who's feeling lost with reality, they've had some form of awakening in some manner, and they are led to some form of ufology that deals with this vein of understanding, the ascension stuff, the starseed stuff, and then they get brainwashed into believing there's some sort of Arcturian, Pleiadian, Taygeta guy. And I feel so bad for these people, because you don't understand that they lie so much. The foundations of the New Age movement depend upon, basically the evolution of George Van Tassel from the, Ashtar's originating at Galactic. Ashtar was a nuts and bolts liberation. He had claimed to have some sort of mental communication with him. And because this guy's predictions, he did work at Lockheed, which had skunk works involved in it throughout the years. So you're dealing with the elite aerospace. And George Van Tassel was wrong so many times about a physical. There was no ascension. There was no spiritual hoopla. There was no pantheism involved with it. It was Ashtar, Sharon, and the Ashtar command was going to come and liberate us. Well, his followers, who were devoted to the channeling of Ashtar, kept getting different messages. It kept not happening, so the excuse kept becoming pantheistic, became more transcendental and spiritual, and depended upon channeling that's highly inaccurate, and it's known throughout occult circles that they lie. But I bring all of this up not to tangent, but for a specific purpose, to show you that I'm not saying that you nor I are with 100% certainty, nor is this theory 100% confirmed. I want to preface this because most of my material has some basis in documented facts. This is mere speculation and a brewing brainstorm think tank from somebody who has a Gallup poll strategic thinking, Clifton Strengths, where all 5 of the top profiles were in strategic thinking. So you got to understand, at least, I have that type of mind. You can look into the Gallup Clifton Strengths 5-panel test. Some claim it's greater than the, as you would say, the Myers-Briggs personality test. And even with that, I have an INTPA. Funny thing about being the logician now, when I started my journey and I took it the very first time, and for years it was INFPT. But as I went through my personal development of self-worth and being confident in myself and honing my spiritual and intellectual and research knowledge, I became an INTP, not an INFP, from an INFPT to an INTPA. A lot of stressor factors happened with my shamanistic psychedelic experiences. And my psychedelic experiences, I mean, I'm a psychonaut, not of psychedelics in the sense of mushrooms and DMT and the like, though I've done DMT. The other did not work on me, and they were real. Don't say they weren't real. And it's the same for acid. I tried acid, and it didn't work on me either. Cocaine doesn't work on me either. Intense amounts of alcohol, shot of strong shit will get me drunk, but it'll get me too drunk and I'm sick at my stomach. I've lived a life of using people as mediums with binaural beats, the usage of me guiding people with known techniques to astral project and OBE on their own. And if anybody wants me to make them a personalized guided meditation, or do you think I should go into that with my voice, maybe make the audio more cleaner and crisper and do that, let me know. Comment on below if you think that's a good idea. And be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're at. I don't want to ramble too much about what we've already talked about, and you can watch the predecessor to this if you want more of the life of that particular aspect of my journey. Now, to the main point, I know I've went on so long, but I wanted to have a preface for this video so you can watch this one without watching that one, because that one is, over 30 minutes. But my greater point is, I believe in hindsight that I might be a MyLab. And I'm not saying this with confidence like Corey Good. I'm not claiming that I'm a 20 and back super soldier. Although I've had bizarre phenomena that has occurred where I have enhanced ESP abilities, the proof of the concept to myself personally. Starting ironically, and I don't mean this to be any way false or facetious, but on December 21st, 2021, I literally woke up that day with superpowers that I can't prove. Now, by superpowers, I mean enhanced connections to time, a prophet-like sense to engage with potential timelines. I've had that proven to myself. I'm in ultra instinct on that day, which means like the Bruce Lee element of I woke up and I had basically autonomous movement. I'm not possessed. I'm not a demon and destroy the child, corrupt them all. I'm a seasoned practitioner of the occult and using myself to do crazy chaos magic. There are ways to get fruit, and I explained this in the other video. And one day I will go deeper into the quantum sciences that I believe go with it. But that's not today in particular. Based on this, the concept of all of these dreams I've had, such as the Matrix-like dreams, the connections to the abduction phenomena where I'm waking up with my shirt reversed in situations where I would have no context to do so. The earbuds back in the case after I went to sleep and away from my bed, no implications of sleepwalking. Other times where that's happened in a similar vein was rather recently. I had a tobacco bag that I bought 2 years before that was in my car. I wake up with it in my room. There would have been no instance where I would have had that. And of course, I explained this in the other one with the dream of the Nordics and the false wake up story. My dreams of being able to I guess you could say open up and control the environment at a very young age, recognize that I'm dreaming when I couldn't do it later on in my life. I've begun to have that ability when I do have dreams. But as a child, I would often understand I'm in a dream, manipulate it, wake up, or be encountered by a non-human, like in the example I brought up, the reptilian, where I laughed it off like a Saiyan, because I basically act like a Saiyan. And then at the end of that video, I started to talk about the unique bloodlines of the world. There are people that have came out from like the CIA, documentedly so, that they're verified they worked for the CIA, were a big time. People like that have came out and said, like on podcasts, for example, that, they did that the intelligence apparatus and the deep state, autonomous system of the United States basically has these, and around the world, mind you, they have these programs where they're connected to hybridization, military abduction phenomena, and relating to, bloodlines and hybridization. And these people have the special bloodlines. I talked about my own, the Skelton Lawrence, and with the dynamic of Lewis and Pickens and the connotations of that. And you should study your own coat of arms. I've had other instances of this, like, I don't know. It was like years of my adolescence into almost into teenage years where I would take time out of most of my day after just being a kid playing games outside, etc. And then I would create my own world where I'm like a self-insert into shonen or any game, right? Just being a kid. But what was so weird about it is I did it so often, and I built such a weird, unique, convenient thing. It's like he was Anakin Skywalker. He looked like Inuyasha with a blue gi. And I was so specific and autistic about this basically dual life I lived, where I was in this imagination complex. And what makes it weird is they start out like the characters in the shows, like Dragon Ball, Naruto, Bleach, Love Hina. I was a little pervert, a genius little pervert on Newgrounds at 6 years old on the fucking, Love Hina dating sim and the DNA 2 ending, if you know what I mean. You're a fucking degenerate just like me. But anyway, I digress, being a little funny. These visions I was having, more or less, they were normal to how I saw the shows. But then the character I had developed for myself to access, and furthermore, the environment around me, the characters that would act like they do, the longer I would do this, and it would happen with any new anime, they would begin to have unique personalities that were unlike the characters, to the point where the ancients and Taoists, the philosophers of the Tibetan monks, they've often said that imagination is a conduit into these greater realms and a ways to communicate. You know, this whole notion that you gotta be still, not thinking, that's not real. That's some sort of like, I'm a pseudo soy eating, drinking, exercise with the Lululemon girls, and that's the only reason I'm new age, because I do that. And I got high one time and had a ego death with the jesters, and they tricked me into believing some sort of Ashtar nonsense. You know, there are ways to access these lucid forms, because the trick is you got to get your brain entrained to an altered state. Perhaps, you know, there's the state of alpha, beta, delta, etc., to get it into a lucid state where it's almost like you're tricking your mind to being asleep, which was the whole point of those astral projection methods. You know, by location, and is another way to put it. And these imagination trips began developing a whole continuity of their own, where I'm traversing timelines within the same show. The character's a time traveler, and he's intervening with these lives even within the shonens, like I'm a self-insert, and sometimes they intermingle to battle my life, and it mirrored these things. And I brought this up and revived it later on in my life after totally forgetting about it. This is the strange thing about that. I had totally forgot about this weird life where I play as a goofy Inuyasha character, Dragon Ball character, Scarlet Fever. I had its own technique. It was truly this eccentric, neurodivergent other reality that I lived for years, every day, every single day. And with these characters who would slowly not just be the original people, having personalities, relations with me on their own as I got older. And that is a method that they say, like the innocence that lives in children to have these sort of things. It was within me consistently every day as a trained muscle. The spiritual realm, occult phenomena, and having ESP and PK as the people within the documented phenomena of like Project Scan 8, Sunstreak, Grill Flame, the Stargate, the First Earth Battalion, and the psychic soldiers like Pat Price and Lynn Buchanan, the Ingo Swann. These types were telling people that anybody can do it. And I think that the real truth is that's not the case, but I think that most people have a way to influence to a lucid state to where you can actually do what they call extrasensory perception. Now, it's not always going to be accurate, and that's where most people fail. They get trapped up into this New Age or Gnostics, and then they start believing they're a god or a high servant, and they're a chaos demon destroying everything. I used to parody all of that with Stomestein, the stuff that I got into a conflict with the Secret Service over, and I've talked about this before, and that's a whole bullshit other story. It has to do with misunderstanding, blatant parody. They originally tried to say that I wanted to kill all these people, and it was actually a known parody. They took that away. They said, oh shit, you know, my dad's wife basically wanted to get rid of me. Long story short, that's another thing, having that conflict, sacking or punching Homeland Security in the nose and then going to prison. You know, that's in itself like it's just a weird saying thing to do. I went into fight or flight because why are you here for my parody? You know, these weird instances. I wanted to go back to what I was talking about, the Anakin Skywalker and Inuyasha concept. You know, basically I started when I returned to this, when after my arrest and everything else, I basically was like, oh shit, I did that. You know, the weird thing about doing this for years, and then it, you know, comes back to me. Oh shit, I did that. So then at this time I've already, you know, started my journey obviously in the occult. But for the sake of when I was like, well, I understand that, you know, the ancients and the wise men of the Orient speak of meditational practice through imagination techniques, sustained imagination. I tried it again, and of course it worked. Characters from video games, because I was like, well, in theory this should work again. That I was somehow in contact with some sort of spirits or people communicating through these methods. Because not to tangent too much, but the Pat Price, you know, these types, I don't know if it was him in particular, but the psychic, you know, remote viewer types said that often they would communicate through frequencies with extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, time travelers, and instances where other remote viewers were in communication with him. One example being that the Chinese allegedly had these child soldiers doing the same thing that they were doing, but because of, like I said, this imagination, the concept of sustained imagination use, and I wasn't even necessarily doing this for any other reason other than whatever bizarre circumstance, ironically, that led me to do it. But as I got older, I did it again, and bizarre circumstances became part of the overall thing. They said a lot has happened since you were gone. And basically it became a battle with these people. As like, this guy's claiming to be you. Somebody was claiming to be me. You know, I'm basically utilizing the concepts that the ancients speak of, that, you know, basically I was engaging over the years of my whole life with this phenomenon, to the point where, at least within the context of these, the lucid experience of continued daydreaming, into the point where it's guided with a purpose like that, as I was doing just organically. As I got older, whatever innocence or mindset frequency that put me in that state basically was like, look, you know, somebody's here trying to be you, imitate you, this and that, and then we start having this battle, this and that, and I developed this ego of it. And then the original version, because I got obese, I got real bad off, and, you know, it's stuff like that. But then as I did this, the original version, because I made it distinct, like it's another elemental archetype, it got jealous. So these mindscapes in my own mind, right? Over time, I integrated all of this and gained control over the simulated aspects of my greater occult journey. And of course, learning to love and respect myself. But it does not take away, like, for example, in the earlier, as I call the Anakin Skywalker meme, you know, daydreaming stuff, I'm having one of the simulations, like, for example, was Naru Sugawa from Love Hina, and I developed this bizarre relation where there's two children. I even, the weird circumstance that it morphed into from Love Hina to now she's with me in a, like, Mass Effect style secret space program, Samus shit. You know, my simulated imagination got so bizarre that it bordered on, what exactly am I experiencing when the ancients in Orient speak of how lucid you get and how information and spirits and beings can communicate with you. And like I've said, I had these dreams where I'm involved with underground ice cavern, like Arctic bases, being involved with this little blonde girl and protecting her and being involved with her, and she's some psychic girl that is connected with royalty in my mind, like in this whole Matrix dynamic. And the weird circumstances of the abduction phenomena, the fact that I've worked and contracted for the United States military on several occasions, both at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for Space Force and Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Now, granted, it was not for any sort of black project, it was for commercial flooring, but the fact remains that there's weird phenomena even around that. My dad, who's not by any means as deep into this esoteric knowledge as I am, he's an everyman. The sailor who, you know, ironically survived the TWA terrorist attack on the Crete Greece flight, you know, he survived that. And I have documented proof if somebody wants to doubt me, but, you know, because he's got the clippings. I just have to get it from him sometime and post it. But, you know, all of these elements, you know, Jake the Snake Stidham, you know, being under Schwarzkopf, like near directly under command, and having big say in the Iraq conflict early on, the first phase. And, you know, it's just like the Skeleton Clan, and I just think that when you combine all of the aspects together of weird Dreamtime and abduction, possessions, like the people getting possessed around me as I started to advance in my occult knowledge, using them as mediums, and then whatever the hell it is that was communicating with me is like, you're not supposed to be here, possessing my boy just after a ritualistic experiment The other one getting sharp pains in his arm. Is like, trying to choke me out as I'm trying to take him to the hospital after I drive over an hour to pick his ass up because he claims his people ain't gonna take him. Take him back to my house. This thing's talking about wanting to go home, pointing to space and shit. Then he acts normal, and then now all these people, after we make up and fight over the years, then they just distance themselves right at the time that I'm like, you know what? All of this shit happened when I was 18 and 19 years old. I'm 30 now. At the time I was saying this, was like, I'm 29 now. And as soon as I started to say that, like thinking about it, because now in the Misfits and Terminal podcast, as I said, one of the dudes with the sharp pains, he was commenting and agreeing with everything. He wasn't even trying to deny me when I brought up on the live stream that, he did that. He didn't say, that's not true, Ronnie. You're making that up. You believe it. It's schizophrenia. No, he said that. He basically was like agreeing in everything. There's even mentions from my buddy Digifits, my co-host for that old podcast. It's old now. The YouTube uploads are recent. But, I just believe that there is a sector of peoples out there who don't even know, consciously in their waking minds, that they are involved with hybridization programs and breeding operations and involved with a whole other parallel life that may be involved with military operations, military abductions, Dreamtime, non-human intelligence involved circumstances. And they don't have to be as aggressive and extreme as mine have been presented in this video, in the previous segment, in the previous video. But I do believe that, there's a strong case to be made, at least for me, based on all of the weird circumstances. And like I said, I can't prove that I'm an Ultra Instinct, that I have time magic, that I'm involved in perhaps some sort of Project Pegasus evolution, the time travel child soldier psychic program, and the ideas of the hourglass project Looking Glass. But the U.S. Navy has admitted that it has the capability to engineer the fabric of reality with its patented technology. You should look into that. Another thing about that is, they're claiming to have the technologies of space-time modification weapons and patents related to it. The Kratos Retreat revival session in the memo on the WhiteHouse.gov was like, we have developed, even though we're stagnating because of policy and how we are living with the energy sources, we've stagnated, but with current technological capabilities, we have left time and distance annihilated. Talking about Dr. Salvatore Pais and the efforts of basically the Pais effect, and he's talking about having room temperature superconductors, and the U.S. Navy vouched for his mass reduction device, inertia device that goes into basically an anti-gravity craft, which leads one to believe with the UFO testimonies that's been recent and whistleblowers and related that have come out on record and testified, some of them under oath, that, basically there's a cover-up of over 70 years relating to downed craft and engineering it, reverse engineering it, and elements of retrievals. So, you're dealing with an aspect of like the 1950s and the Brown effect and the anti-gravity craft and patents that Brown was all about. The Brown, was it Bofield Brown effect? I can't remember exactly, but that. So, I may be having a dual life because all of these things that have came up, and this could apply for you. It don't have to be so severe. It could be lesser, but it could still involve. And I don't want it to seem like anybody that's going to watch this who may have similar vague inclinations have. But you can't rule out, especially with the talks of the GATE program. Now, I know that there's no verified full-on proof of the materials and testings of the GATE program that involve with the more mall world, talks in the pool worlds and stuff. Now, I do think that that has to do with a real phenomena, because if China and these other places are doing it, I'm sure the United States would be. The whole reason of concept is that the United States was trying to work with psionics because the Soviet Union was working on their own psychic program. You had Uri Geller in Israel that, despite certain times when it had failed, there are documented cases where his psychic abilities were confirmed. And, there are times where he's bending spoons. There are weird times where it's called the 8 Martini effect, where skeptics and scientists who were on board with the psychic research of the United States Armed Forces and intelligence, they basically would start drinking because they became dumbfounded, and their mindscape was shredded by the truth of psychic abilities. People doing that, seeing with their minds with remote viewing, killing goats with the mind, the men who stare at goats, the other related time travel shenanigans with remote viewing, and with just coordinates, mind you. No specific details to what the two separate remote viewers were even looking at, to the point where people like Pat Price, these types were involved, like the ODNI, the investigative branches of the United States military were like, how does this guy know about this particular installation with this particular cabinet file, with this particular paper, with this particular operation name, and these particular off-duty but still record officers for the assignment? It's like, well, he's a remote viewer and he got cleared. They were going to get him for the Espionage Act. That's how accurate remote viewing can truly be, ladies and gentlemen. And if you actually study the remote viewing content and other, like I said, Project Scanate, Grill Flame, Sunstreak, Stargate, the Phenomena book by Annie Jacobson is a Pulitzer Prize winning documentation of this phenomena. Sci-Spies by Jim Mars, phenomenal investigative journalist into these topics, but he's, rest in peace, he's passed away. But this idea that of people having dual lives through the Dreamtime and whatever advanced technologies that may exist, for skeptics, I can't prove it. A lot of things I talk about, I don't have, here's the saucer, here's the alien, here's the god, etc. I give you reason to believe it's probably likely that something happens, or that this is likely so. I never claim to have ultimate truth. I do think that we should be highly skeptical of academia and the skeptics themselves, and those who have the skeptical movement, because their vein of ideology is materialistic and physicalist, of the types of Edison, Einstein, mafia, the types that were influenced by Carnegie, Ford, and, the philanthropy of those such as, them and Rockefeller and, of course, Rothschild, the whole industry of basically calling someone an anti-Semite if they disagreed. The whole mindset behind being skeptical and rational behind the gatekeepers like Tyson, Bill Nye, and other skeptics, just to be the official opinion of wherever they want science to be at any given time. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson's begun to talk about these things, as has Michio Kaku, but I think that goes into the greater non-human disclosure integration, UAP disclosure, and the quantum age that I've discussed with CBDCs, digital IDs, quantum holographic, and the like infrastructure over a Li-Fi and etc. styled ecosystem. That's a video I've gotten itself. You can check that out, and be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are at. So yeah, if any of this applied to you, ladies and gentlemen, and I know that's what I meant when I said I go into critically specific things, because I might be an outlier case. But like me, if you've had experience or phenomena of any kind, perhaps had a similar vein of story to anything relating to the specific things that I have went through, then it may be so that you are a product of NEPO bloodline elites that stem from non-human intelligent bloodlines. I just did a video called Elohim, the non-human intelligence among us, going into the non-human intelligence, the gods of old, and comparative religious studies, where basically, you you have the trail, and I'm going to go more into the Malachim, the Bachlim, or the Balim, the lords and the bloodline elites as time goes on here in the next, few weeks, perhaps days. I just need to see how I feel. But yeah, I might secretly, and maybe if I do some deep transcendental meditations, I did bilocation techniques where I basically have bilocated to Mars in a lucid state. And furthermore, I've done this on several occasions. I would say most notably, if I could count, twice, maybe 3 times. I've been where I would get into an exhausted state, lay down, perhaps enhance the lucidity with the altered state of sativa cannabis, because sativa gets your mind working, indica gets your body relaxed. So psychonaut properties of the cannabis is with namely the sativa variant, and there's been a history of people utilizing cannabis and other types for recreational psychoactive hallucinations and meditational visions. The founding fathers some of them partook, there's a history of this. So, basically, to make a long story short, I have bilocated, and I've seen and felt, I feel the Mars. I feel it, and I sense the metal. I sense and can visualize this rudimentary base where we are bringing back life to Mars, and it goes into the, basically the idea that the radioactive isotopes found on Mars from the Discovery rover, basically were nuclear exchanges going into the ancient Akkadian Sumerian tablets in the form of, Zechariah Sitchin and Michael Tellinger, those veins of ancient astronaut, speaking of the territories, Lamu and etc., of the, flyby of Nibiru, the planet of the crossing, the red-hued volcanic planet with a dying atmosphere. Monatomic gold would be good for that, and other things, exhalers like ambrosia, to give you more long-lasting longevity in life and the slowing of the telomeres. I think that was a concoction similar to the mentionings of basically the Final Fantasy style revive vials, where they basically bring people back to life with these concoctions. The history of making potions and powerful mead may be lost to us. The botany that they had, the chemicals, the alchemy and stuff like that. Like, they're already trying to, I think they've even began to study the alchemy again with these new technologies to turn chemicals into actual gold. I've seen certain things on it. I'll have to, talk about that when I can find the proof. I came across it in passing. I've always been lucky with the algorithms my whole life, especially when they were good back pre-2026 or 26, my bad, or 16, my bad, 2016. So yeah, if you have similar experiences, maybe external results to your particular practice outside of maybe channeling an entity or doing some basic OBE, out-of-body experience, where you may be gate-kept by ascension, which, mind you, I've explained before that George Van Tassel was wrong, and the people who followed him closely, who branched out with their own versions of Ashtar, basically became what the ascension movement is today out of failed predictions. That's why I don't take it seriously. This whole idea of ascension, the New Age, Madame Blavatsky styled Golden Age, we're out of the Kali Yuga. Like, come on, that's stupid. And, it's like Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's basically Third Impact. If you don't know what Ascension is, it's basically fucking Evangelion's instrumentality project. Merging everybody into one hive mind under this Christ consciousness shit, and being with Nordic aliens and blue aliens and bird people and cat people and traversing the stars. It's really whacked out. It's the more whacked out version of the Maria Orsic, Space Brothers cliche. You do have the Vrillion hack of the British television in the 70s, where Vrillion of Ashtar Galactic Command allegedly is claiming a nuts and bolts invasion as well to liberate mankind. They never proved where it was, and they've relegated it to a hoax, but it's never been verified who did it. And the signal is alleged to be the North Star. So, just now, once again, I'm bringing this up, and we're going to end it with this, that if you have anything remotely close to any of these particular experiences, maybe more than one, you may be involved with bloodline hybridization, NEPO, in the sense that it's a generational bloodline of important elites passed down from the Elohim and the like Anunnaki, angels who bred with the Earth Adam and others that hybridized into our modern Homo sapiens sapien. Basically, you might actually be. I might actually be. I have a stronger case than somebody who has a third eye, a Kundalini awakening from smoking a little too much pot like I did. And just to further disclaim from that, I believed at one time that I was a Pleiadian starseed, simply because I fall for the rhetoric that first began. It did not take me long to get out of it, believe me, because my mind, my Clifton Strength strategic thinking, I just did not accept the premise as it was. So, and then I quickly realized it's a cult that's very dangerous, and all of these so-called ascended masters and this and that birthed out of Madame Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley types, Maria Orsic, Thule Society variants, the Vril power of the coming race. These people birthed a new age deception out of all of the old deities. And what's more likely is that they were the Lebensborn, like the Nordics on screen are probably the Lebensborn hybrids between what was really the albino, more alien, non-human intelligence, and the reptilian-like creatures, as Eric Davis has said, is probably the Seraphim. So, not to tangent too much on that, you can go into my other videos on red pills, such as the monotheism deception and Elohim, the non-human intelligence among us. So I won't keep you anymore, people. If you watched to this point, I thank you. And be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're at. Comment down below what you think, and I will see you all next time. Damn, son, that's it, nigga. Brrrr.